everybody. I'm going to call to order the February 3rd, 2021 meeting of the Carroll County Planning and Zoning Commission. Can we establish a quorum, please?
Ms. Cheatwood?
Here.
Mr. Huff?
Here.
Mr. Canali?
Here.
Mr. Walters?
Here.
Ms. Kirkner? Mr. Lester?
Here.
Mr. Gosnell? Commissioner Wance?
Sorry, I'm here, Laura.
Okay, I see you. Secretary Eisenberg?
Here.
Ms. Chair, please let the record reflect that 6 members are present and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on, we do have a revised agenda. Do we have any other changes to the agenda, Laura? Linda, I'm sorry.
No, just the revision of removing the Mount Airy Annexation 43 Hairston Lake Shear and replacing it with the FY22 preliminary recommended CIP and bond authorization discussion. That is all.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We'll move on to item number 5, our administrative report. Secretary Eisenberg.
Good evening, everyone. And a special good evening to Commissioner Wance, who is now our new ex officio. Welcome back to Planning Commission. You haven't been with us in quite some time, so we're happy to have you and your expertise and knowledge and have great discussions with you. And also want to welcome our newest member, Pete Lester. He is from the Freedom area and he is replacing Planning Commission member Soyson, whose last meeting was in January with us. So welcome, Pete. He and I had a great discussion on Monday talking about his onboarding process and trying to get him up to speed. So I'm sure he'll be a quick study and we'll fall right into place with this Planning Commission. Pete, did you want to say anything while we have a moment?
I think at this point, my less is more, and I'll just say that most of my success is due to an uncluttered mind, and right now it's pretty full of all the stuff you sent me. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, again, welcome aboard. Thanks for being here this evening. Also want to make an announcement because I'm sure you all will hear about this soon enough, that Tom Doublebiss, who is the Director of Land and Resource Management, will be retiring March 31st. He comes before the board a lot with a lot of the development review projects, and he is in charge of the Development Review Bureau. So we'll be sad to see Tom go with all his institutional knowledge. So if you know him and want to reach out, I'm sure he would love to hear from you. It's going to be a huge loss to the county, and I'm going to be very upset because I work very closely with him. We collaborate on a lot of projects. So Tom will be greatly missed by the county and the planning department, especially. And actually, he just arrived. I didn't know he was going to be here. So thank you, Tom, for being here. Tom, did you want to say anything with regard to that?
Hang on 1 second. What were you discussing? I apologize. I just got on.
I'm sorry, I did not know you were going to be here. I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but I was letting them know that you will be retiring March 31st as part of my administrative update. So is there anything you'd want to add?
No, that's pretty much it. March 31st is my last day here. That's correct. So I thank you all for everything you've done over the years, you and your predecessors, to support our department and everything we've done, and look forward to working with you here the next few months over one of the agenda items we have here tonight. So thank you all very much.
Tom, we'll miss you. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. It was a challenging decision, but one I was ready to make. So thanks again.
And then really quickly, the change in the agenda, just want to give you a little bit of explanation about why the Mount Airy annexation number 43 Harrison Lake Shear was pulled from the agenda. At this time, the decision was made to not move forward with that annexation. So therefore, that was removed from this evening's agenda. So I just wanted to let you know why that was happening. So don't expect it on any future agendas unless something changes. So just wanted to make you aware of that as well. So that's all I have for you as far as my administrative report. Are there any questions or comments?
So was that the decision of the town not to move forward with the annexation, or the property manager?
That was the decision of the property owner, who at this time is the Industrial Development Authority, or known as our IDA. They chose at this time to no longer move forward with that annexation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we replaced that with a new item number 6, which is the FY22, the preliminary recommended CIP and bond authorization discussion. I had added this to our agenda because I wanted Linda to kind of present the items that the planning department had put in there that I think we have all kind of noticed going through the master plan and all the rezoning and the freedom plan, how important some of these things are. And I just wanted to see what Linda had put forth so that when we go have the discussion with Ted and discuss whether it's consistent with the master plan, I think we really need to see what planning thought was also important to us to implement the plan. So Linda, did you have a presentation or anything? You're on mute.
Yep. So I do have a presentation prepared just to show you a couple of highlights that really pertain to Planning Commission and planning. So if you recall at the last meeting in January, Ted Zaleski came before the Planning Commission giving you his presentation that he had presented the Thursday before to the Board of County Commissioners with the 2 peach and yellow documents, binders, notebooks. You should have these in your possession. We did distribute them, so you do have these. Presented to you the highlights of this document. So Cynthia and I had quite a conversation. So what I'm going to present to you tonight are just a couple key things that have direct planning, I wouldn't say implications, but direct planning relevance, especially to the Planning Commission. So I don't know if I can share my screen, control room. Thank you. So can you all see my screen? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go into presentation mode. And can you still see that? Okay. All right, so again, I'm going to go over just a few slides regarding the FY22 to FY27, what we call the CIP, or the Community Investment Plan. And then there is a link to that I put in here for those documents on Budget and Management's website. And if we need to pull it up, I can do that as well. So annually, planning does prepare items for the annual CIP. And we do that based on the adopted plans that we have. And the idea is that we want to continue to implement our plans. One of the steps of implementation, other than the comprehensive rezoning or rezoning efforts, is actually to start construction and get these into the capital program. So these are projects that have been directly discussed in our various plans. So the Freedom Avenue sidewalk, that was in the not only Freedom 2018 Community Comprehensive Plan, but also the Bike Ped Pedestrian Plan that you all approved last year. We were looking for an 80-20 grant that this CIP project would be contingent upon, and that grant was going to be through Safe Routes to Schools. And this was a new request brought forward in FY 2022 for this sidewalk extension. And this would be along Freedom Avenue that would give access to Freedom Elementary School. The next, and I'm going in order in which they are presented in the CIP requested the Peach booklet. Georgetown Boulevard Extension. Now, this is a historic project, and this was something that Ms. Cheatwood wanted me to look at is these projects have been put in the past and what the outcome was. So doing a little bit of research with our budget and management liaison. So the Georgetown Boulevard Extension does have a history. It was originally introduced in 2003. And our Public Works Department does have a preliminary design, I'm sorry, 30, I think at least a 30, maybe even greater percentage design of this segment of roadway. And then this project was removed from the CIP in fiscal year 11. I'm not 100% sure of the rationale behind the removal of this project, maybe because things aren't moving forward. I don't know if it was budgetary, but it was removed in FY11. Then 2 fiscal years ago in FY20, this was requested again by the planning department, knowing that the Freedom Plan had just been adopted and that there was the beginning of the site plan review for the London Town Boulevard, the hotel that's being planned there with the subsequent pad sites there. And that request was for $2.3 million. The next was Johnsville Road and Karen Drive sidewalk. Again, this was a grant contingent project, 80/20, and this was a new request for FY22, and this was $644,000 request. The reason in the discrepancy between Freedom Avenue and Johnsville has to do with land acquisition and possible utility replacement. Freedom on the side that has the right-of-way, there's a ton of utilities that are underground and above ground. So that would have to be moved in order for the sidewalk to be put in. And if not, then we would have to go on the other side of the road. Since we do not own right-of-way in that stretch, we would actually have to work out a right-of-way, perhaps purchase agreement from the properties if the sidewalk were to move forward. Johnsville, we did not have that constraint, so that would be more for the sidewalk construction and any drainage and stormwater management that was needed. So I just wanted to explain why the big difference in price for the sidewalk. Next is the Monroe Avenue extension, and this is Monroe from Oklahoma to Bennett, not from Bennett to Maryland 32. If you recall, that stretch was removed out of the 2018 Freedom Plan to not connect to Monroe all the way to 32, but rather have it stop at that Bennett Road. And so this was originally introduced in 2002. Because by fiscal year 2009, no action had been taken by the developer. So this would be on what is now known as the Hobie Wolf property. That this would be that portion that goes from, I think it's called Oak Creek Estates or Oak Creek. The county took over a portion that would require a bridge with that development. So we did not require the developer of the northern portion to have to develop the bridge. Now we would be requiring the developer of the southern portion to extend the road, but it would terminate where the county owns the property, and the county would need to construct the bridge, and that estimate is at $1.3 million. Then the final is the Ridenour Way extension. This was originally requested in 2018, and this would take Ridenour Way that's already developed from where the Nels Acres property is in Fallon Drive, taking it and using the existing roadway on Old Liberty Road, extending Ridenour to Panorama. And that would be for a cost of $1.45 million. And again, these are all cost estimates. So this is what was proposed in the budget for this year. And these are the requested items. And these are all directly from our various plans. Other requested items that are plan related or plan supportive are the ag preservation, because that is one of the goals within the master plan itself is 100,000 acres of ag land. I also put in there things like the Engler Road roundabout, the Bark Hill Trail, Gillis Falls Trail, Northwest Area Regional Park Master Plan. Those types of projects help forward either the land preservation park and recreation plan, help support our growth areas where we want to see developments. These are supporting services to those areas such as the North Carroll Library renovation, the North Carroll Senior Center. Another one, and I apologize that it's in this section. It should have actually been in the section above. The Sheriff's Office for the Eldersburg Precinct, that is mentioned actually in the Freedom Plan, is that it's not necessary to meet the concurrency management standards or any adequacy to have the Sheriff's Office, but it was something that was desired and wanted and would be enhancing to the area. Again, the Tawny Town Senior Center, Freedom Water and Sewer Treatment upgrades across the board. There's many of those outlined in the requested. And then also the Sykesville Pump Station expansion. So these are all supportive of the goals and objectives of the various plans that we have created in the county. So this slide represents, the highlighted represents what actually went into the recommended budget as opposed to the requested budget. So the recommended kind of made it to that next stage. So the first items, and I'm just going to go back to what we requested: Freedom Avenue, Georgetown, Johnsville, Monroe, and Ridenhour. None of those projects made it into the recommended budget. And the recommended budget, and I don't want to go and misinterpret how Ted does things, but basically that's the budgetary constraint that we have in the county. You know, we have many more projects and much more funding requests than we can pay for. So this recommended is, my understanding, within that fiscal constraint of what we have in the budget for the county. So these projects did not move forward to that next level of budget. So ag land preservation the request was fully funded for $4.6 million. The Bark Hill Trail, the Gillis Falls, and the Northwest Area Regional Park Master Plan, those were all fully funded. And I would say a lot of that money, if not all of it, fully comes from program Open Space, which is the state funding mechanism for park and recreation. And 50% of that needs to be for acquisition of new parkland, and 50% needs to be for park development. So that comes from a separate pot of funding, and that's what's reflected in our budget. The Sheriff's Office for the Eldersburg Precinct was fully funded at $8.7 million. As well as Freedom Water and Sewer Treatment upgrades were fully funded for the request of 1.1, as well as the Sykesville Pump Station expansion was fully funded for $4.3 million. And again, that's what's right now, they're recommended. None of this is approved until it makes it through the commissioner's process. And the commissioners begin their processes, I think this month, starting on Tuesdays, they will be having budget discussions on the recommended budget. So what our role in Planning Commission, and this is not for the decision at all this evening, but what you all typically do is I draft a letter for your review and your submittal. What we would be saying in this year's letter is that it is consistent, because that's something that the land use article requires under Maryland law for the county CIP projects to be consistent with the master and applicable functional plans within the jurisdiction. So we would say that it is consistent with our ag land preservation goals and objectives, funding for trail and parks, the Sheriff's Office, and the Freedom wastewater sewer system improvements are all directly consistent with the plans. And then I wanted to mention, because this is what we had done in the past, is that there are several critical roads projects that were not included from the requested to the recommended. So I did mention Georgetown, Monroe, Ridenhour, and that the Freedom Avenue and Johnsville sidewalk projects would be majority grant funded and would not be requested to move forward, and they would be grant contingent if the Safe Routes to School grant was procured. So that's just the highlights of what is in our CIP and the projects that I had seen that we put in directly and that did not carry over, and then the ones that did and that are consistent with the plan. So with that, are there any questions? And I'm gonna leave it here for now.
Linda, this is Sharon. Can you give us any more details on that precinct? I'm surprised that the cost is $8.7 million.
So I am pulling what's in the requested budget, so I can just read to you. I don't have any more information than what is in the actual budget that we have. So, so the details that we have are to provide planned funding for construction of an 11,000 square foot sheriff's office precinct to be located on West Hemlock Drive in Eldersburg. Operating impacts begin in fiscal year 25 and may include administrative position, utilities, insurance, trash removal, janitorial services, etc. So because we do our budget in 6-year increments, many times when we put in new projects, we put them in the outer years and then have them carry forward. So this project was put in several years ago in the outer years to begin for engineering and design in FY 2013 for $810,000. And then starting in FY 24, we begin the site work, construction, equipment furnishings, and other expenses. So that's all the details that I have regarding that project.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
So, Linda, this is Jeff. I'm curious, how staff recommend that we address the issue? As I understand it, the question before us is, does this CIP as presented, is it consistent with the master plan? Is that really the only issue that we're addressing in our letter?
Correct. So you're addressing if it's consistent with the master plan and not contrary to, and that's really, I think, more what the role is to make sure that nothing in here is something out of the ordinary that was never mentioned in the plan, and everything that's in here does fulfill the goals and objectives as outlined in our plans. Some may not, we don't always specifically lay out everything, but it is supportive of the plans and nothing in here is contrary. And the example of contrary would be is if the county were looking to build something, let's say like a new road that was never mentioned in the plan. Well, and it's not fulfilling any goal and objective of the plan, would that be consistent? I think those are the things that would be the red flags. So what we're looking for is just that letter of consistency that would go to them to see if it would be consistent with and not contrary to our plans.
So if the master plan calls for extending roads, for example, to deal with planned congestion, and over the next 5 years, the CIP says we're not funding any of that, how do we say that's consistent with the master plan? It seems to be inconsistent with the master plan to me if we're not funding moving forward with those aspects of the master plan. So how do we reconcile?
So I think, it's a very good question. And I think, these budgets are very constrained and everyone does the best they can to move them forward. I would suggest not saying that this is inconsistent, but rather you would like to see these other projects move forward to be even more consistent with the plans, because nothing in here is contrary to what is in the plans, so to speak. And I think that's the discussion for you all to have of how you would like to proceed forward and how you want to proceed forward.
Yep, that was exactly why I kind of brought this up. I feel what we've seen now, especially with the rezoning as we're trying to implement our plan, we've noticed, our plan to me kind of seems the preservation of land, the ag pres is a huge part of our plan, but another huge part of our plan is in order to have an effective ag pres, we have to make sure that our growth areas are also being met too. So that's why, with the roadways, that was one of the biggest things I was thinking, because those were constantly brought up in our freedom plan as huge parts of it. So I don't know how anybody else feels. It feels like we're always fully funding our ag pres, but then when we're talking about other parts of the plan, those don't get totally, they don't get a part of the pie.
So Cynthia, what would you like to, and I stepped away real quick, sorry, but what would you like the letter to say at this point? What are your thoughts? Where are you going with this?
This is what at least I wanted to have the discussion between all of us, because I think we've really become a lot more, we've had the master plan for a while, but now that we're actually doing the implementation step, I think the CIP is really coming into more play from what we see. So once again, if we're going to keep going to our growth areas and say you got to take this, it seems to me that though something has to happen to help the growth areas. To me, it's a little bit more level playing field. I'm not really sure how we would say in the letter, but it just seems that the ag pres is taking precedence over everything else. And I know that's not popular, that's a thing to say, but it feels like that is our main goal at the detriment of our growth.
Well, the other thing that crosses my mind is why are we required to, or given the opportunity, but I think it's required to sign this letter. My limited understanding of this is because it gives us the ability to make sure that if there's a master plan in place, that it has some effect, that we don't work on a master plan and then we have no ability to make sure that resources are being allocated in accordance with the priorities of that master plan. And look, I totally get a budget is at its core competing priorities, and what those priorities are depends upon the leadership of the county and the various administrations. And, I understand all that. But here we are with this statutory obligation to sign or to provide a letter that puts the reputation of this commission forward that says the CIP, as we've seen it, is consistent with the master plan, i.e. at least the priorities that relate to the master plan are in line as we see those priorities through the lens of the master plan. And if, for example, the roads, which I agree with Cynthia, that's something that's very much on my mind because we've heard a lot of public comment from our community around frustration over congestion of roads and traffic studies and making sure the master plan takes that into account. And we have a CIP that at least for the next 5 years funds none of it. It's hard to say that's consistent, that those priorities are in any way aligned with the priorities of the master plan as it relates to those roads. If it showed some funding, the 5th year out, it's at least something that says there's some priority given to this. But I think as far as I read this, every column I see, whether it's Freedom Avenue sidewalk, Georgetown Boulevard extension, highway safety improvement, Johnsville Road, Monroe Avenue, on and on and on, they all have zeros next to them every year for 5 years. And some of these has been in this plan going as far back, I think you said it's like 2003 or something. And they're still at zero. So if we're going to say it's consistent with the master plan when we don't think it is, I'm not sure we want to sign a letter that says that. If we think it should be consistent at some level, then it seems to me that it should be. And again, I'm not saying it trumps all other priorities or should trump all other priorities, but we're being asked to sign a letter on behalf of the commission that says that the priorities reflect consistency with our master plan. And at least in these areas that we're talking about, it doesn't seem like they do. Now, maybe there's another way of looking at it. I'd be happy to do that. Right now, it looks like it isn't, to me, at least.
Well, Jeff, and I'm just, talking off the top of my head, but I totally understand what you're saying, and get the argument with roads that everybody just keep on kicking the can down the road when it comes to the roads. But, the issue is there's just not enough money to fund all of this. So, there's a decision that's being made that's not being made by us that these are the priorities. And of course, that goes to the county commissioners. I understand what you all are saying, but is it, it is consistent in the sense that, you know, the money that's being spent as part of this CIP lines up with some of the goals of the master plan, but it doesn't line up with the goals. We maybe would not make the same decision as our commission of where, you know, because you could say the thing about ag preservation. I could say, well, why are we spending 8.7? And I'm not saying, you know, don't call me Sheriff Louise. You know, why are we spending 8.7 million on the Eldersburg Police Station? Why don't we put that towards roads? So I get what you're saying, but we're not the ones. I get the frustration, and believe me, I get the frustration because I have a lot of frustration when it comes to our master plans and how things are done. And don't get me started there. But is it truly inconsistent? It's just that the priorities that they're making are maybe not the priorities that we would make, but that's not the position that we're in to make those decisions, I guess. I don't, and again, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but I understand the point you're making and it's valid, but I don't know that if I'm thinking it through, that it leads me to the point of saying that the CIP is inconsistent. But I haven't thought about it a whole lot, so I'm just talking off the top of my head. So.
And Dan, I think that was, I'm sorry, Dan.
This is Jeff. I was just going to say, you know, to your point, Dan, it seems like to the extent it's funded, the funding seems to be consistent with the master plan. And there are other aspects of our master plan that are receiving no funding. I don't know if receiving no funding is inconsistent with the master plan. I'm just trying to figure out how we honor our obligations and make truthful statements. I mean, I'd be happy to say to the extent things are funded in here, they seem to be consistent with the master plan. I don't see things that are funded that are inconsistent with the master plan, but there are elements of the master plan that are not being funded.
And I would think that we could comfortably say that we agree with what's presented, you know, with the caveat that, you know, if it were our call, we might, you know, elevate a few of these projects, these road projects, if it were our decision. And I would simply say too, to be specific, to me, it makes no sense to spend money on Monroe or even Georgetown when basically those are roads to nowhere at this point, because there's going to be development, you know, on that Hobieworth property and the Beatty property along Bennett. So when those are developed, then all of a sudden we have a reason to make that connection and to make that expenditure. Until that happens, it's a cul-de-sac, and it will be a cul-de-sac. And so, you know, why spend the money on that? So that's my thought on two of the road improvements that you know, one's a bridge and it seems pretty expensive, and that's a reason for it, right? Because we've got to cross some water. But to the extent that we could maybe dial back the ag preservation and maybe spend money to fund a road project or two, that might be worth consideration.
So it sounds like what exactly like Dan and Jeff had said, you know, nothing in the plan is inconsistent with our master plan. However, as a commission and the experience that we've gone through in trying to implement the plan, I think we need to maybe come up with what do we feel are priorities too. So exactly like Pete had said in the letter, you know, everything that's funded is consistent with the plan. However, we would consider these immediate or I don't think we call it immediate or other priorities that the county should start to take into account.
I'm okay, like if you know, between Jeff and you, there's some massaging you want to do on what we want to say, and that we can bring that back and talk as a planning commission about doing that. I guess where I'm at the end of the day, or the two things that occur to me, is number one, I understand the point and the concern, but I don't think I don't know how we say the CIP is inconsistent. Because I don't feel it's inconsistent. I feel like there's just not enough money. And number two, like, while I certainly think we could, make a comment on what we think is more important if we choose to do that, is, at the end of the day, the budgetary authority doesn't lay with us. It lays with the county commissioner. So at the end of the day, we can suggest whatever we want, but it's not our call. And I would argue, and Cynthia, you're talking about Ag Pres, there's other ways you could get that money besides Ag Pres, because I'm, I have a soft spot for ag preservation, but I mean, I get your point, but, there could be other ways that you could look at it, too. So I don't know. I maybe it's something we can think about a little bit and come back to. Is that the idea here, Linda? You don't need something tonight?
No, I do not need anything this evening. We just wanted to have the discussion. So I do have a draft letter written for your approval. I can send that out prior to the meetings when we have our next meeting. If you'd like to change the wording, we can discuss it at that meeting and make a decision. Again, I would not suggest not saying that this is inconsistent. However, maybe I love how you both articulated priorities. We understand there's a ton of priorities. We'd like you to consider these road projects a higher priority for inclusion because of their importance for, X, Y, and Z. So just something to consider. I think we can work on the language there. And I would say the CIP is not inconsistent by not having included those projects. Just those projects didn't make the cut for the fiscally constrained priorities that the county has. And again, the commissioners haven't even made their priorities yet. So they could look at this recommending, like, these are priorities, let's swap it out. And those are the policy and budgetary decisions that they have under their direction.
Linda, when you send this draft out, there's nothing to stop Cynthia or Jeff from making a suggestion, even via email, because we're not going to decide anything via email, but hey, this is how I would, here's another stab at it. Is that okay for them to do?
I don't think that violates any open meetings. Just to simply review something and give some suggested language. I would defer to our attorney, Jim, if he heard the conversation and just want to chime in.
Yeah, I agree with Linda. I don't see how that would violate any open meetings standards.
Okay. Yeah, because we're going to discuss it when we're back in the meeting. It's just if they want to throw something out as an idea, they could. Okay.
Right.
Is it possible to get whatever the statutory provision is that has this requirement that we're supposed to sign this letter? I mean, does it give us any guidance in terms of what our statement that it's consistent with the master plan, what that means, or what the context is, or anything?
I
or is
can't
it not
pull
helpful?
that statute for you. We do cite the statute in the letter, and I will pull that for inclusion.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be helpful to me, at least. I'd like to see it. I'm not suggesting that we trump the commissioners, or we should. We don't, and we shouldn't. It's just we have an obligation here. I'm just kind of curious exactly what the statute says we're supposed to be representing, what we're doing, and making sure we carry that out as we're supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the main reasons why I wanted this add to our agenda because, well, first of all, we got the documents pretty late anyhow. And like I said, the stuff we've been going through the past couple of years and actually implementing our master plan and the Freedom Plan, I think has given us much more insight, even more than before. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the implementation part, it's one thing to put the master plan together. The part we're doing now, the implementation gives us so much more insight that I think it was worth this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. Linda, for putting this together for us.
Thank you, Linda. That was very helpful.
All right, good. Well, any other questions? But I will go ahead and forward the letter and the statutory requirements to you all for your review. So that's all I have for you for this topic.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 7, the community solar zoning text amendment, the discussion. Brenda?
Good evening. So I am going to share my screen if I can. I wanted to start off with some a background, give you a little bit more information. Let me just get this started. Right. Can you see that okay? Right, so I wanted to first just give a reminder again what the community solar facility is. So based on the Maryland code definition, which is in the Public Utilities article, is 2 or more subscribers. It's going to be connected to the electrical grid. A community solar project needs to be in the same service territory if you're going to subscribe to it. So you need to be in BGE's territory. If you're a BGE customer, you need to subscribe to a solar facility in that territory. The power that's generated then reduces the subscriber's electric bill. The maximum size of a community solar system is 2 megawatts. It can be less, but that's the largest it can be at this time. It can be owned by pretty much anybody. And the statewide cap for community solar facilities is 414 megawatts at this time. That could change. So I also wanted to just reiterate that, the text is proposing that all remaining portions that are 5 acres or greater in the ag district would be eligible. But that doesn't mean they'd be suitable. And there's a lot of variables that are up to the solar developer to decide whether or not any given site is actually suitable. And that could be anything. And most of this is actually done on a case-by-case basis. Like, you can't decide ahead of time because the developer needs to contact the utility company on any given project to see what things apply to that property. So the proximity of the lines to lines, the 3-phase distribution lines that they need to connect into, and how far they are from those, the capacity of the lines. All lines have a certain capacity that they can actually facilitate, and if they've met that capacity, they can't add any more solar projects to it. Individual site constraints, such as slopes, sun exposure. If you're facing on a property that faces north, likely, it's not going to be quite as beneficial. The cost of the project, and of course the Maryland Public Service Commission and the utility company, either BGE or Allegheny Power in Carroll County, would actually need to approve the project. There's also state policies that would come into play, and you have that they cannot be adjoined. You cannot have community solar facilities on 2 adjoining properties. You cannot put a community solar facility on a property that was subdivided within the last 5 years. And of course, it can't exceed 2 megawatts in capacity. So with that in mind, I wanted to show you, we have some maps we put together. So what you're looking at here is the brown is the agricultural zone in Carroll County. The orange properties are all of the remaining portions in the agricultural zone that are over 5 acres. So there are a total of 724 parcels on 22,871 acres. So all of those would be eligible, but again, based on all those variables, probably the majority of them wouldn't necessarily be suitable, but we can't tell that. So what I've done here is I've added the current preserved acreage to the map. So all of the green parcels are those parcels that are under easement. So that's as of the end of fiscal year 20, that was 74,211. But I can tell you that we have exceeded a major milestone, and in October we exceeded 75,000 acres preserved. So, but this was data we had as of the end of fiscal year 20. So you can see on this map that, of course, the orange and the green do not overlap because remaining portions are not eligible for the Agricultural Land Preservation Program. So you can see where the orange would fill in the green. I could just roll my thing in the right direction. All right. And then what you're looking at here is the sort of, I don't know what color that is, orangish brown corridors. Those are 2-mile corridors, so a mile on either side of what would be potential three-phase distribution lines that the facilities could connect into. That information came from Maryland Department of Natural Resources website. They have a they call Smart DG Plus, where they map this kind of information, and we use the information on there to map this. And this is where we think those lines would be. So you can see that, of course, the solar developers are going to seek out properties that are closer to the three-phase distribution lines, because that would cost less to connect into than ones that are further away. So any of the orange remaining portions that are within these corridors would be closer to those lines and conceivably less expensive. And you can see there, most of them actually fall within the corridor. So out of the 724 parcels, 647 parcels are inside, within a mile of the three-phase distribution line. Only 77 of the parcels are not. So this just gives you a little bit of breakout on the size of the remaining portions that you saw in those maps. A significant number of them are actually smaller, between 5 and 40 acres. So it's almost just about half that are actually 20 acres or less. And that, just keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through the text. So, the larger you get, the fewer parcels there are in that size. So I wanted to give you that background. I mean, if you have any questions on what I showed you, I can answer that. But I wanted to actually bring up the text that was sent to you so we can just review the text, and I will have it share my screen and actually make changes as we go, because the idea is that you'll want to make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and I can make the changes on the screen as we discuss it, so that it would reflect what your recommendation to the board would be. I think that might be the easiest, most efficient way to do it. So I'm going to switch over, if I can figure out how, to.
Which email where we received the actual text? Because I must have missed that. I got, I got other things, but I did not get the actual text.
I think Laura would have sent it out last week sometime.
Yeah, I think all I saw was the presentation.
Yeah, I didn't receive any text. Did anyone else receive text?
I don't think so. If I did, I didn't recognize it.
Yeah, we have not received any text, and I really, so I don't know how constructive it's going to be for us to go through the text tonight, because we haven't seen it. And I guess now I'll kind of bring up something else real quick. And I actually want to, see the text and digest it, but I got a lot of concerns about this. I totally get why there's some desire to do this, but, I've heard a lot of rumblings from people in the farming community that are not real happy about this. And I kind of feel like as a planning commission, for us to, make a recommendation to the county commissioners, I would like to get a little bit more educated or some feedback from, either the Ag Commission or the Farm Bureau as to exactly what their concerns are in detail, as well as I would not mind hearing from somebody that is involved in the solar industry to get a better sense of what truly are the types of properties that they are looking for, and what motivates that. because, you know, we have preserved a lot of farmland, and that's one of our goals. And I'm all for solar, I get it, all that. But I am concerned that by allowing these solar facilities in an ag district, that we are changing the character and tone of the ag district. And I want us to be very careful about what we do with that. So I don't know, Linda, whether that is something that we could, you know, at a future meeting, at one of our night meetings, where we could have somebody come from the Farm Bureau or the farming industry and kind of give us their perspective of what their concerns are, and also someone from the solar industry to better understand, because I think there's a pathway through to this. But I'm right now, like, and of course I haven't seen the text, but right now I feel like a little bit uncomfortable being okay with it. And I want to be okay with it, but I'm not there. And I don't think I'm going to be there without hearing from some other people.
So I'm working with Loriana to see where a disconnect was, because she sent what she had. So we're just trying to retrace what had happened with regard to that. So I apologize if it was sent to us and we did not forward it. Laura's very good at forwarding what she has in front of her. So we do apologize. And as far as having others come to me, that's up to you. We are happy to make that time on the agenda if you want to have those others participate to get more insight into the discussion. And I can work with Brenda and she can help us.
How does everybody else feel about that?
You know, Dan, you're raising some great questions, and you know, I have some basic questions too. Like, I would like to know what 1 megawatts of solar power panels looks like. You know, I mean, how many acres would that take? How many panels would that be? And then 2, I mean, if we're spending money to put land in agricultural preservation, you know, how does this work with that or against it, right? Because there's an integrity there that we're trying to preserve, and are we? Does this fly in the face of that? I honestly don't. I'm ill-equipped, because they're two. You know, again, I'm for solar. I mean, my daughter-in-law works for the Department of Energy, and this is her thing, and so, you know, I'm all ears on this. But you know, those juxtapositions, preserving agricultural land and encouraging solar power, you know, on contiguous properties like this, I've got questions about it as well.
Can I suggest, that could be that I somehow managed to forget to send this when I sent it I forgot to attach it when I sent the PowerPoint. It's possible. But since I have it on the screen, I could possibly go through it tonight just to get you familiar with it.
Brenda, I do apologize. I did find it, and that was the week when we were sending lots of different things, and I was waiting to have everything at once to send it off, and it did slip through the cracks. I apologize. That is my fault. I did just send it to everyone. I know that it's short notice for tonight's discussion, but you should have it now.
I really think it'd be more beneficial to go through it after we've had a chance to, you know, look at it ourselves, because to just scroll through the screen and point things out, it's not really going to be, at least from my standpoint, very productive. I don't know how the other members feel, but I kind of would rather, and again, also, I kind of want some additional input from people that are more qualified to have opinions about this than I am.
Yeah, we received a letter. Did you guys also get, I think it went to the whole board from, I don't have it up, but I have the letter up that had some excellent points in it about long-term maintenance through, let me find out who sent this letter, but also some excellent questions about this.
I just feel like we need to be better educated about this particular subject. It is something new, it is something different. And before we're sitting here making a recommendation that I'm afraid that, you know, 10 years down the road, you know, I'm driving by and going, why the hell did I ever say yes to this?
So,
That's
hey,
what my concern is.
if I could chime in here for a minute, I've been kind of quiet through these last two conversations. On this particular one, we are just in the beginning stages of getting the ideas on what this would mean and what it would look like for our county. And I'll tell you, in my role down at the Maryland Association of Counties, we've got that lovely little city of Annapolis that tells us a lot of what to do here. And currently there is a bill that we need to be, we need to be more green efficient by the year of 2030. So if we don't do something now and do it in the right place here, Annapolis is going to tell us where to put solar panels. And I'm not a fan of that. So that's why we try to inject this and get some ideas on where we could put them that would best suit us and not do it where we're told to put them. So we're just in the beginning stages of doing this. I encourage you to get all of the presentations that you can. Actually, that's what we're doing. We're hearing, we're hearing from the farming community. We're hearing from a lot of folks. But the bottom line for me, and I'm kind of the one that brought this up about a year or so ago, along with Commissioner Frazier, I do not want to be forced to put something somewhere because somebody down in a seat in Annapolis told me where to put it. I'd rather put it where I want to put it. And this is kind of the way, the beginning stages of being able to do that. I don't know if that helps your conversation, but I wanted to throw that in there.
Commissioner Wance, no, I totally understand. Believe me, I understand where you're coming from dealing with Annapolis as well. Yeah, I get you. And I think that this is possible. I just feel like, from our standpoint, we do need to get a little bit better educated. And just the fact that there seems to be a lot of concerns out there in the farming community, I kind of want to understand what those concerns are better so that maybe there's ways we can mitigate it through whatever we come up with here. So.
This is Jeff. I agree with everything that's been said, and I certainly appreciate the commissioners informing us about that this is really an opportunity for us to sort of control our own destiny a bit, as opposed to having it prescribed for us. And so I approach this subject with that appreciation. Along that line, I think it would help me if I had a better understanding of what sort of solar capacity already exists in the industrial zones and in the commercial zones. Because my understanding is that solar can be used in industrial and commercial already. Maybe, I don't remember off the top of my head if I'm sure there are some limitations to it. But how much capacity do we have in industrial and commercial? And then I know from the presentation, we're getting some good data here, and Brenda, I appreciate the data about there's about 724 parcels and 22,871 acres are eligible, but it sounds like a fairly small subset of that would be suitable. And then of course that gets to the question, in my view, my bias, by the way, is I don't really like these black glass things out on agricultural land. I said that in the last meeting. I'm open-minded and I'm persuadable, but I think they're ugly. But nevertheless, I understand the need for solar. And so I balance that against the fact that I think they don't look like a cornfield. But at the same time, if a very small subset of this acreage is suitable, then it seems to me the solar benefit is negligible. And if I'm wrong about that, then I'd like to be educated about that too. So I think, to Dan's point, I'd like a lot more information. I have a lot of questions. Last time we heard from the Farm Bureau, and I know that they said that their whole membership, I think it was them, was against letting this on ag land. That's an important voice to me. And I'm sure there are voices on the other side that say they want to let it on all of the ag land. And I'd like to hear their views and understand their position as well. I'm persuadable. So I'd like to be able to hear from these folks. As usual, we have competing interests. And I'd like to make sure I understand the various views and be able to ask the questions.
And I can work with Linda to, make sure that we get some people who can provide you more information like that. And I'm pretty sure that, there's only a couple callers on, but I'm pretty sure that there were at least 3 solar developers who were planning to be in attendance, which would be by phone. So they may even be able to provide you some information in their comments tonight.
If I could, if you would allow me to say a few words here, I think I'd like to. I think first thing you have to realize is that the staff worked with the Board of Commissioners to get to the point where we are right now. So we are following their direction as far as, looking into the ag zone and where would it most or best fit in the ag zone. And so when we did that approach, to minimize that, we looked at several things. We did not want to take up any lands that could be potentially preservable in the ag zone. These lands are not preservable that you saw. They have already had their development rights taken. In all senses, they are developed lands. So in that sense, they are not preservable. The other thing we wanted to do is look, how could they blend in with the surroundings there? So in that sense, we looked at making them ag friendly as far as like pollinator friendly, the ability to have some type of ag use associated with the solar development. The final thing we did is we wanted to look at landscaping and trying to screen it. Which, that's other than the fact that maybe people don't like the appearance of them, they're one of the most benign uses that you could stick somewhere. I mean, other than the appearance, they don't generate dust, they don't generate noise, they don't generate traffic, they don't generate people who complain that are living there, so to speak. So, it is one of those uses that, aside from the aesthetics, there is no real true impact on the land. But we wanted to make sure that the landscaping was addressed and the decommissioning and abandonment of them in some future time, which most likely will happen, is addressed. So the reason I bring up some of these things is we met with the commissioners twice to kind of get on board from a staff perspective. We've been working for 6 months now, pretty much, staff, with the solar community, and our staff met with the Ag Commission, the Farm Bureau, the Soil Conservation District, and the Ag Advisory Board here at the county. And as I think indicated last time, we heard loud and clear from them that they do not want it, all right? And we conveyed that to the commissioners. But we were charged to keep moving forward with this concept to see where it would go. So what Brenda has that she was going to present this evening to you was a conglomeration of all those things put together. So I don't want you to think that we just are before you with something here that we haven't had put a lot of time, a lot of effort in to accommodate what we've heard feedback from people to this point, because we've heard quite a bit. So, I understand you want to get feedback from those individuals who are directly involved in this, which is a good thing. But I would ask possibly that you look at the proposal first, because a lot of the questions that you have that I've heard right now are going to be answered with this draft and with things that we can answer. And then you take some comments from folks on the various sides in response to that. Because I think a lot of things that you have concerns about or interest in might be incorporated into this draft, which I say we've taken quite a bit of time, many iterations at the staff level, and actually even working with Linda's staff to review this to get to this point with you. Again, this is nowhere a final product and all, but we think it's worth a consideration here, and then having some input from folks who are involved in this. So with that, we certainly will go back to and come back to you when you're ready. But I hate to miss an opportunity to have an educational moment here and for you to take a look at this either now or at your next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, the issue with looking at the draft tonight is just that we haven't seen it. And, that's the whole point, is that, with the mix up and all with the emails, none of us have seen this. And not that I don't not that, Tom, you don't have a valid point that it'd be nice to sit down and go through it, but it's just not beneficial because I've had no time to look at it. For me, trying to read something on the screen is non-productive for me. I need to be able to sit down and read it myself a couple times to make sure I really digest it, especially with something that's so unique and new like this. So to me, you know, the issue with my issues about wanting feedback have nothing to do with wanting to go through this tonight. I don't want to go through this tonight because I haven't seen it, and I want to see it first. And I understand that, you know, but we're being asked to make a recommendation back to the county commissioners. And I think from our perspective, to be able to do that at some point in time, I want a more detailed opportunity for certain leadership, whether that be within the solar industry itself or whether that be in the farming community itself, to not just make a 3-minute comment where I want to be able to have a back and forth, which is not what public comment is for. So that's my thought. My suggestion is that we, you know, come back after we have had time to digest this draft, then we can go through it with you all, but then at a next step, have some dialogue with somebody from the industry and somebody that can represent the farming community to kind of, so that we can have a little bit of back and forth, so that we feel more confident in what we're going to recommend back to the commissioners.
I agree. This is Gene. I agree with what Dan said. And as far as Jeff's remark, I sort of agree with him too, that I don't think they're ugly, but they're very industrial looking is, I guess, a better term that I'd like to use. But and I certainly wouldn't want to have that next to my house. But and maybe this will come out in our review, but I think it's general. I think everybody on the board wants to wait and review it later after we have a chance to review it ourselves. But the basic question at the end of the day that I always come back to in looking in this is I'm asking myself, what is the need? Who is pushing this? And do we have a defined solution? If there is a need, how do we get it and what is the cost? And I know when I was working, I dealt with this quite a bit because there are a lot of companies out there that will come in and sell you on solar energy, not really based on a need that you may have, but a need that they have is to sell solar. And there's no doubt about it, we're going to have to get there because not only Annapolis, but the federal government continues to push for renewable sources. But I don't think we're going to get there with solar. That's just my basic opinion. And until we can find a better solution, I think this is going to be continue to kick down the ground. But anyhow, I'll ramble on here, but I'll say I'd like to know what the need is, who's pushing it, what the cost is, and what guarantee do we have if we do define a need, what guarantee that solar is going to get us there.
So if we don't have any more discussion at this time, I know there are callers. I think, you know, we do have a time on our schedule for the public comment on this. So I'm going to go ahead, I think, and move on to the public comment part. Linda, do you want to do the public comment?
So we are just going to call the callers. We do not have them signed up in any particular order for this topic. So I think it looks like we have 3 callers on the line. So I guess the control room can unmute them, that would be great. And if you can just announce your name and give us your comment for the evening. So I guess caller 1, introduce yourself, please.
This is my name Jake Springer with NextAmp. Oh. Not sure how you want to structure the order here, but this is Jake Springer with Nexamp. I'm happy to talk first.
Okay, go ahead. Can you repeat that, please? What is your name again and who are
Yes.
you with?
Yes, this is Jake Springer, and I'm with Nexamp.
Okay, go ahead, Jake.
Great, thank you. Again, Jake Springer with Nexamp. We are a developer and long-term owner and operator of community solar in Maryland, as well as across the Northeast. Currently have one operating community solar project on the Eastern Shore that serves over half of its customers are low to moderate income, with multiple other projects in or proceeding to construction. So obviously there's been a lot of discussion today that I think is great, and came prepared to talk about some of the specifics to the amendment, but I think more generally, I would love to work with you all and bring some more constructive feedback so that you all can make an informed decision about what to do with this amendment. But I would like to talk briefly while I am here about some of what we do and the benefits. Community solar can bring a lot of value to Carroll County, and by opening the door to community solar, the council can generate new tax revenue, as sort of was discussed already, without new demand for services, and great opportunity for local jobs, and provide a new option for Carroll County residents to save money on their electricity through energy that's actually generated within their own communities. Particularly for low-income residents, community solar may be their only means to invest in solar and to save money on electricity that isn't through benefit programs. And this option really, I feel, is important to be available for Carroll County residents. As far as the siting of these facilities goes, I disagree, I think, with the concept that community solar in agricultural zones should be specifically limited to the remaining portions. Obviously, the staff has looked to consider the viability of these specific parcels, but I think far more could be done with far less acreage if developers are allowed to work with landowners who are interested, rather than having these sites sort of picked, the landowners and the sites picked via the ZTA, as currently would be structured with the remaining portions language. And I can understand that there may be concerns about protecting agricultural land, share those. Community solar is not inconsistent with those goals in my mind. For many landowners, hosting community solar is a revenue stream that allows them to resist permanent development pressure and keeps the nature of the land intact. Lease payments from hosting community solar are an important revenue stream that balances their more traditional revenues, which might be more volatile. And community solar can provide direct agricultural benefits, either through sheep or other animal grazing, or providing important pollinator habitat. And community solar can keep farms working. And when the posts are removed, a future generation has an opportunity to decide what to do with the land again. So as there's questions to be asked, and hopefully those of us in development community can have the answers for you as we continue to work forward. And I look forward to being able to do that and getting a zoning text amendment here that can work for everybody. So thank you. I really appreciate the time.
All right, thank you so much. If we can have the, now 3 other callers on the line. So if you can just get your name and who you're with and where you're calling from, that would be helpful.
Yeah, hi. My name is Mike Borkowski. I'm with Community Power Group. We're a Maryland-based company, and we think that you guys have done a really good and thoughtful job of going through the code and kind of it's your county and identifying land that you think works for you. We've reviewed every single one of the sites that's on your map. And as somebody indicated earlier, we see a maximum of 29 parcels of land out of that whole giant map that could potentially host solar given the different parameters. We'd be happy to share that, come in there and share that in person, which exact parcels there are. We've actually talked to several of those landowners. Some of them are in a financial situation where, it's difficult for them to keep solar, or that land in their house, in their families, based on, $50 an acre for hay or, a bit more, a couple $100 for, corn. Solar provides an opportunity for, 1,000 plus, well over $1,000 an acre per year for that farmer. And we actually talked to some pretty big farmers in the county. And interestingly, one of the reasons they said they didn't want regular people to have solar on their farms is because then they can't keep the land and they have to sell it. And it's the way they're worried that farms won't come on the market as much because people want to put solar on it and won't be able to pick up as much cheap land. But at the same time, there's somebody else who is losing farm in their family and they can't pass it down and pass it along anymore because they're having trouble affording it that way. So it's just a little bit of an interesting anecdote on some of what we heard out there. But to answer some of the quick questions, 1 megawatt equals about 5 acres of solar. So you could never have more than about 10, 15 acres on a particular parcel, just given the 2 megawatt limitation. Solar can't go on preserved land, so you don't have to worry about that. Other states are using solar as a way to augment agricultural preservation, because now this land is not going to have homes on it. It's not going to get developed with commercial. It's actually going to be able to be used in 35 years for farming purposes when the solar gets removed. So it actually, you're talking earlier in the meeting about a budget shortfall on preserving land. Well, put solar out there and it'll actually preserve the land for you. So, these are just a couple of things highlight. Happy to come in anytime you guys want. We're right here in Maryland, come in and talk to you. But lastly, and most importantly, I'd like to point out that this only addresses community solar. 7-306 is the law for net metering that addresses community solar. But what the county has left out is within 7-306, there is a net metering program. Community solar just addresses the residential. There's another component that benefits the ag industry, governments, and nonprofits. And the way the law is written right now is governments, nonprofits cannot benefit from these solar facilities. And all you have to do is, in the definition of solar energy generating system, all you have to do in that paragraph is add and shall include meter aggregation under COMAR 20-50-10-7. And then governments will be able to get discounted power. Schools will be able to get discounted power. Agricultural communities, that farmers will actually be able to benefit from discounted power. It's a very small change, all the same parameters, all the same land, but the governments and everybody else can actually get additional financial benefits beyond the tax revenue and everything else by adding those 6, 7, 8 words into the text that you already have. And I think that's really important. We see many other governments, Washington, a lot of other counties, schools, and other things that are taking advantage of the discounted power that net metering can do. We think it's an important change. And again, we'd be happy to come in anytime to talk to somebody, walk them through those different parcels, and walk through these kind of 7 or 8 words that should get added to the text to make sure the agricultural industry, governments, and nonprofits can participate in the financial benefits of solar. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time. And just again, as a friendly reminder, we're trying to stick to a 3-minute time limit for discussion purposes. We can just keep the meeting moving this evening. So the next caller, if you can state your name, who you're with.
Sure, I'll go. This is, my name is Frances Uhas, and I'm with the Turning Point Energy, and I am a lifelong Maryland resident and have been working in the solar energy industry since 2005, when I had the opportunity to put a little rooftop system on my roof. But it has become apparent that not everyone is as fortunate to put solar on their own roof. So community solar really does allows everyone to participate in solar energy and the green energy economy. And therefore, we need to support Maryland's, there was a lot of discussion about Annapolis dictating where this goes. Well, many of the Maryland legislature, put a very ambitious renewable energy goal in place. And I think every county needs to help support that. And so, first of all, I want to applaud the staff, and Tom is right. He went, they've been working on this for 6 months, and Brenda, in particular, just really appreciate her keeping up with everything. She's become a community solar expert and keeping the website up to date, so that there's transparency and everyone can see how this process is playing out. But I want to echo what the previous speakers mentioned and just say that we would be happy to come and visit, or virtually visit and share the information. What do these projects look like once they're built? How do we handle decommissioning? How do we mitigate neighbors' concerns and collaborate with the farming community to make this a win-win situation for everyone? Because the county really will benefit from the economic benefits, from the increased tax revenue, the job creation during the development and construction process, as well as the benefits to the ratepayers who can subscribe to solar energy by giving us slight rate savings. So I wanted to just offer that, yes, we would suggest some modifications to the ZTA as it is written to allow projects to actually be built to satisfy, I think, the intent of the ZTA. And I do have some questions that I would like clarified, but at this point in time, I think it's fair to give the Planning and Zoning Commission time to read the ZTA as drafted, and then I would like the opportunity to come back and address some of these questions and have that one-on-one dialogue to collaborate and see how we might come to a happy medium. Thank you so much.
Hey, Linda, I just wanted to interject just to remind all the callers that we do have an email address. And so if there's, several people have mentioned different things. If you have anything to submit, please email it to us so that we receive it. Because if you have additional background information, that would be very informative for us to have. So I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have an email address, and please, if you have information to share, please email it to us. Sorry, Linda.
Yes, and that is just for everyone's reference. The email for Planning Commission is plancom, PLANCOMM, @carrollcountymdaltogether.gov. And so we have one more caller for this topic on the line. So if you can announce yourself, please, and who you're with. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Leslie Elder, and I'm the Mid-Atlantic Director for the Coalition for Community Solar Access, where I'm charged with implementing and maintaining community solar markets in Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. I'm also a fifth-generation farm owner. So CCSA is a coalition of businesses and nonprofits working to expand customer choice and access to solar for all Maryland households and businesses through community solar programs. Based off of the conversation that has been going on tonight, I thought it would be better to provide some basics in community solar rather than going into my specific comments on the ZTA. So today, nearly 75% of American households and businesses do not have access to solar because they either rent or live in multi-tenant buildings or have roofs that are unable to host a solar system. So community solar provides anyone who pays an electric bill equal access to the economic and environmental benefits of solar energy without the need to install a solar system on site. It expands solar for all by providing energy choice for customers, and it injects critical economic stimulus into local communities like yours. Community solar facilities are small that work directly with landowners in a manner to preserve the land throughout the development process through responsible installation, maintenance, and agricultural uses. Essentially, once the facility is built, the land lays fallow for the lifetime of the project, and once it's decommissioned, the land returns to its original condition. And often that soil is in better condition than it was before. So as I said, I have specific comments, but I will submit them through that email address that you just provided. And I'm really pleased to hear all of the conversation that you guys have had and are interested in learning more about community solar as a whole. I'm happy to share lots of materials with you so you can see what facilities look like, how they work in conjunction with the agricultural industry, and really who they serve. So if you're interested, I would be happy to continue these conversations with you, local farmers, other constituencies, in a manner that you all see fit. But overall, we really appreciate that Carroll County is looking to address zoning for community solar. And I look forward to partnering with you and the council to finding the best ways to bring this economic driver to your community. Thank you for your time.
Okay, and I don't believe there's any other callers for this item.
Thank you. That was very helpful to hear from the developer side. So our next step, I guess, is we'll review the text, and then they'll be back on our agenda in a coming meeting. Is that what we'll do, Linda?
Yeah, so Laura did send out that text to you, and we again apologize, Bern. I'm sorry that got mixed in the shuffle, but you all should have that in your inbox now, what she was presenting for this evening, and I will work with her to get it on the appropriate agenda and move forward. So, I'll work with Brennan to see what best works.
Would it make sense that, Cynthia, Linda, everybody else, like, we're going to get the text, and then the next time or whenever we're going to meet again on this, we're going to go through the text with staff, get their comments, get their feedback about why they did things a certain way. And then maybe we can decide what other additional information we need, whether that's hearing from the Farm Bureau or hearing from different solar representatives. Does that make sense? As far as I think we need to have some conversation regarding what's been prepared so far before we jump to have people come and see us. Do we agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to kind of get the thought process that the county has had first as to why what they're already, so before we hear from others.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Okay, interesting. Wow. Never a dull moment. So I think we've got a lot to do with that too. Wow. I'll move on now to item number 9, the comprehensive rezoning commercial industrial employment campus, the by request recap. I think this recap of the commissioner's decisions, correct, Linda?
Correct. So you all had asked us at the last meeting to have a quick recap of the commissioner's decisions for the by request map amendments for the commercial industrial and employment campus. It is 7:30, so we also have one more agenda item after this. I'm going to roll through this quickly so we can try to stick to our 8 o'clock end time for the meeting. And please just stop me at any time if you have any questions. So just to let you know, we had 28 requests come forward with applications for change for their rezoning from what their current zoning is to a new zoning. Most of the requests were consistent with the comprehensive plans, the Freedom Plan, and the Carroll County Master Plan. Out of that, the Board of County Commissioners, after they heard your recommendations and held their own listening sessions and public hearing, 18 of the 28 requests ended up being adopted. I'm going to go over which ones were adopted and which ones were not adopted. And this changed 13 zoning maps in the county. So I can show maps, but maybe just to go through it quickly, I'm just going to name the properties for you all. And if you need me to describe it more, show the map, I'm happy. Well, they're going to share my screen. Okay. Okay, so let's see. I'm just gonna go ahead and do this. I apologize. All right. So this map here, this represents all 18 properties that were adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. Those maps have been signed, and it is official as of ordinance 2021-01. So basically the first ordinance of the new year was the approval of these properties. And this is the list of the commissioner for each of the properties, and following through the staff recommendation, the commissioner's the planning commission's recommendation, and the commissioner's provisional votes, and then their final votes. And this kind of shows you the history of each property, of property number, their name, what their current zoning is, what their requested zoning is, whether it's consistent or not with the plan, and then the recommendations and final votes moving forward. So the first property was 0001, which is the Abar property, or also known as the Legacy School. This is in the Freedom District and is on tax map 68. So the request was from Ag to Employment Campus, and this was approved by or adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. The next property was 0003. This is known as Wedekind, and this property is along Old Washington Road in the Woodbine area on map 77, and the request was Ag to I2. This property is located along the Tapsco River area and completes that entire area of industrially zoned land for that section. You've seen a lot of development review projects come forward on Wedekind Drive recently for that industrial type complex. The next was the C2 14-2020-004 or Stockdale, and this was a request for 3 parcels to be rezoned from R20,000 to C2, and this is directly across from Liberty Exchange. So this was also adopted by the commissioners. The next one was C20720200005. This is known as the Stonesifer property, and this is located on East Main Street in Westminster, and the request was R10,000 to C2. This was already, in some ways, having some commercial uses on the property. It's within the county, but just outside the actual corporate limits of the city of Westminster. The next was the 0006, the Evler property. This was on map 77, again in that Woodbine area. Now, this was rezoned from BNR, which was part of the earlier comp rezonings where we had to move properties from their BNR and BG to the appropriate C1 or C2 and C3. So this moved into the C1 district. The property owner came back again as an applicant requesting the C2 designation. The main reason behind their request is they wanted to see vehicle repair as opposed to just auto service centers, so they could do more of the heavier uses associated with vehicle repair shop. The next,
Linda, our final recommendation was unfavorable, and then the Board of County Commissioners did favorable. I remember that was a little bit of a one where there was a lot of debate, so I can get how they got there. Okay, go on.
Yep, correct. So staff gave it favorable, PC had it unfavorable, and then the board decided to move forward with a favorable recommendation. The next was 0009, KMP Resource Recovery. So if you recall, there was a swath of KMP Resource Recovery properties that came forth for requesting rezoning. There are 5 properties in total. One of the properties behind the landfill, his request was to go to I1. They pulled that application and moved forward with the employment campus, the commercial 3, and the I2. This property, the request was from Ag to Employment Campus. This is in the Westminster Environs growth area, not quite within the corporate limit or near the corporate limits. It's a few properties east of the corporate limits, but within the Westminster growth area. So this one did have a favorable recommendation from staff, Planning Commission, and was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. That was the only property in all of the kennel holdings in that area around the landfill that moved forward and was adopted. And I'll tell you about the other 3 properties once I get through the adopted list. The next 2 I'm going to talk about together, 10 and 11, which is Southern Maryland Oil, which is the Jiffy Mart at the intersection of Maryland 140 and Suffolk Road. And then the other is the adjacent property that's owned by Tevis Real Estate, which is a current billboard. These are on map 53. and the request for R40,000 to C2. And these had favorable recommendations from the staff and planning commission to the Board of County Commissioners. The next was 14. This was MAD Properties. These were two parcels to make up this request along Old Liberty Road. And this is just south of 26. The request was ag to C2. So these did move forward. Staff gave these an unfavorable recommendation, but Planning Commission gave them a favorable recommendation moving forward for C2 designation. The next is 15. This is the MJ Graff property. This is located off of Lineborough Road in Manchester and is within the Lineborough Rural Village. And the request was ag to C2. And again, that had favorable recommendations from staff and planning commission, and the board adopted. The next was the 844 Professional Center, and the request was R10,000 to C2. This was property 0017. And again, this had a favorable recommendation. This was in the Westminster Environs area off of Old Washington Road. And this is part of that whole stretch of zone R10,000, but we have all of those medical office complexes. So again, we all know that the Westminster Environs Plan needs to be updated, and that is something that is on our upcoming list of plans that still need further updating. We've done Freedom, the Finksburg, and the County Master Plan, and now we need to really work on the Westminster Plan once we're done with the Transportation Master Plan. The next property is 0016. This is the Fogle properties. These are two properties just outside the municipal growth area of Sykesville along Obrecht Road. And the request was conservation to I-1. It goes over two zoning maps, map 73 and 78. Staff and Planning Commission both gave this an unfavorable recommendation for I-1. The board adopted it with a favorable recommendation for the I-1 designation.
Linda, was there a, just for our educational benefit, was there what was the rationale that was used to get there, or can you succinctly say that, or not really?
They looked at the area, they looked at the property, and felt that it was consistent and that this was favorable for an I-1 designation. So I think that's as succinctly as I can put it. But they just, the Board of County Commissioners just felt this was an appropriate rezoning and didn't feel it was consistent with the plans moving forward.
Okay.
And I apologize. I kind of skipped over Fogle and went to 844 Professionals. We already talked about that. The next one is the NT Laney property. This was on map 57. This is property 0018. On Salem Bottom Road, and the request was ag to I-1. Both staff and Planning Commission gave this an unfavorable recommendation, but the Board of County Commissioners gave this a favorable vote and adopted the change. Again, using that similar rationale to the Fogle properties and finding it consistent with the plans. Next was 0020, which is the Maryland Mallet. This is located on Littlestown Pike, just north of Westminster. On tax map 21, the request was ag to C2. Staff found this unfavorable, but Planning Commission forwarded a favorable recommendation to the board for C2, and the board adopted with the C2 designation. Again, this is on 97 on the southbound side, southbound 97 side. So the next is the Kicker property on map 52. This is 0024, and this is located on the kind of northeast quadrant of Maryland 97 and Maryland 32, at the end where Old Washington Road becomes Maryland 32, just south of the YMCA, and the request was ag to C2. This had favorable recommendations. I'm going to scroll down to the next page. Had a favorable recommendation from staff and Planning Commission and was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. The next property is actually owned by the Board of County Commissioners, known as the Delaney Properties. These are north of Ronsdale in the Freedom area off of Pleas Mill Road. And this had a favorable recommendation from staff and the Planning Commission for Ag to Employment Campus. And then I'll talk about the last two ones that were adopted by the board. These are the Buckman and Associates and the Semino Trustees. These are small properties that were zoned R10,000 that are C2. These are consistent with the Freedom Area Plan, and everyone, staff and Planning Commission had a favorable recommendation on the south side of 32, just to the west of the Princess Shopping Center. So, as I said, out of the 28 requests, only 18 moved forward. So that means 10 did not move forward. So that was the Playtime Corporation. That is off of Old Westminster Pike. It is a daycare facility that you can see from Maryland 140. It's just north of the Reese Fire Department. The request was from Ag to C1 and C2. Again, staff and Planning Commission gave unfavorable recommendations, as well as the Board of County Commissioners. The next was Boak 4 LLC. This property's request was Ag to C2, and this is just north of the industrial area outside of the Westminster and Environs area. And again, this had an unfavorable following from staff and Planning Commission. The next was North Carroll Community School, their current location, and they are currently zoned Ag now. And they had a request for C1 or in the alternative C2. Staff gave them an unfavorable recommendation, as well as Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. The next properties were the request for the KMP Resource Recovery, which was 12 and 13. That's part of that whole greater grouping. So 9 of the employment campus in the municipal growth area moved forward, but these ones did not for the commercial high C3 request and the I2 request. Staff and Planning Commission both gave them favorable recommendations, but after much discussion by the board, they moved forward and felt the timing was not right and gave an unfavorable recommendation and did not adopt those changes. Next was the GEMS property, which is located along Maryland.
On with the KMP resource, they just felt like it wasn't ready yet. What was the rationale there?
Yes, was not ready at this time, and just felt let's just hold off on moving forward with those properties. And then there was a lot of public comment on those properties and discussion also. So just the decision was made, let's just hold off on that moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
The next was the GEMS, and again, this is at Maryland 140 and Old Westminster Pike, right as you cross over the reservoir into Carroll County. It is on the south side of Maryland 140. This had a lot of discussion, and the original request was for the entire property to go from conservation to C2. There was a boundary that was put forward that reduced the size of the request to match the northbound side's commercial property designation. However, the commissioners did not approve this for the new C2 boundary. And the rationale was the reservoir and the sensitivity at in that area, the environmental constraints on the property, and most importantly, just the traffic and access to that site they felt was really limited and was not appropriate for that C2 designation.
Well, that was one that wasn't unanimous on our part either, so we had some
No,
debate.
there was a lot of conversation and discussion from Planning Commission as well on that.
That's understandable.
The next was Finch Services 0023. This property is split zoned, Ag and I2. The I2 portion was originally zoned IG with the other comprehensive rezoning where we had to move everyone out of the IG and IR to the I1 or I2. that portion moved to I2. The rear portion was still zoned ag. Staff gave this an unfavorable recommendation, as well as Planning Commission. During this time, the commissioners had a lot of discussion about this property. There was a lot of concern about Maryland 31 and the intersection for this property and traffic issues, as well as just the consideration of how that would affect the surrounding ag community. The applicant was asked to consider I1 in the alternative, and to maybe consider a reduction in the boundary. They came forward, the applicant finished services with that reduction. However, the commissioners did not feel maybe it was a significant amount, enough reduction to make a substantial change, to maybe reconsider having another hearing for the industrial request, and what was going to put it on hold and host a new hearing, but ultimately they decided to not move forward at all and did not approve that reason. I'm going to come back to the Long Meadow Farm Beatty property discussion and go to the Roy Pool, which was 0029. This request was ag to I2. Staff and Planning Commission gave this an unfavorable recommendation. This has been the subject of many Board of Zoning Appeal expansion requests over the years, and the request was to move to this I2 designation. Ultimately, the Board of County Commissioners also found that they did not want to make the change and adopt the I2 for this property. And then finally was the Colburn Holver Bay, which ties into our original agenda for this evening, which was the Harrison and Lye Shear annexation. It was just timing issues. We had received the request from the property owner at the same time, unknowing to staff at that time that this annexation was going forward. And I believe staff, if they had reviewed it again, we would have maybe thought the timing was not correct, let the annexation move forward first, but the Planning Commission and Board did not move this property forward, and the Conservation to Employment Campus request was not adopted. So that's the synopsis of what was adopted and what was not adopted as part of these requests. The last property is 0028 Long Meadow Farm Beatty property, and this request is I1 to C2. If you recall, in the Freedom Plan, there was a 40-acre future land use designation of C3 or commercial high. The applicant came in and requested actually C2, so a lesser intense commercial use, and reduced the boundary from 40 to 30 acres. However, this was also kind of moving in tandem with the residential text, which you'll be hearing about next, and the residential mapping request. So because of the timing of things, the Board of County Commissioners would like to table this property's commercial request and move it forward with their residential request simultaneously. You have already forwarded the residential map request to the Board of County Commissioners. You did that several meetings ago. We are waiting for now the text to catch up with the map changes and hear the text and the map for these properties all at once. So that has not been approved nor denied. It's just going to be on hold until we have the residential discussion with the Board of County Commissioners. And I'll talk about the 30 acres and then the balance of their R20,000 request as part of that effort. So that's just a quick summary. I'm sure we talked about these properties ad nauseum for 6 or 7 months. I'm sure you're very familiar, but are there any other questions regarding these properties or the outcomes? Okay. Well, that is the quick synopsis. Everything is on our website at carrollrezoning.org. The ordinances and the official zoning maps have been posted on our website, and the commissioners have signed them, so they are official. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mary Lane to talk about the comprehensive rezoning. the residential text introduction and present to you where we are with that moving forward. So
Thank you, Linda. Could you make me the presenter? Or did you want to move the slides?
you're
Thank you. Whoops. Okay, I will do my best to get us out of here by 8 o'clock, and this is a pretty short presentation because our purpose today is really just to begin the review. I'm sorry, can you can see that, can't you? Can you see the presentation?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure. My screen's kind of different. As I said, our purpose is just to begin the review of the residential code sections, which, as you know, we've been working on for about 2.5 years. You were sent the text, and it's about a 39-page document at this point. We do have comment bubbles in it. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet, and if that's distracting to anyone, I can send you the clean version as well. But that is what, starting at the next meeting, we'll be working through. I think hopefully those comments will help with any questions about some of the minor changes that we made without having to go into too much detail about them. As with the commercial.
Mary, I'm sorry, can you send a clean version too, just because that might be nice to just read a clean version as well.
Do you mean clean without the comment bubbles or without the strikeouts?
Or without the strikeouts, like the final version, without all the, you know, this is great. I like this, but I also like to be able to just read the thing without
and it'll only be about 10 pages too, so you'll really like it when it's good. So we will be working over the next several months on this over probably multiple work sessions as we did with the commercial and industrial. But tonight, this is just a general review. So the agenda for tonight is just to very quickly review what we talked about at our December 2nd update, since we have for the benefit of several new members. Also an overview of the zoning administration text changes, which have been made since early December. Talk about next steps and any questions and answers. So again, on December 2nd, we talked about the history of why we are doing this, that the concept team, which is our interagency staff group, began in the spring of 2018 with the help of a citizen focus group. We expanded our public engagement with the concept team meetings open to the public. Unfortunately, with COVID, those public meetings turned into webinars, but we did hold 3 webinars in the fall, and several of them were fairly well attended, and I think we got some of our message out. We've always had updates posted throughout this on carrollrezoning.org with the working draft of the proposal and detailed meeting notes for anyone that's interested. And again, I think, especially this time around, we have gotten a lot of back and forth with interested parties. We've updated groups who've asked, and we've probably fielded more phone calls and emails than we did when we were doing the commercial and industrial. So I do feel like this is out and known by interested parties. Why we are amending the code, the 2 main reasons, as you know, implementation of our master plan and the freedom plan. And again, all changes that we're making are in furtherance of these plans, and they are consistent with the plans. And also it's necessary to modernize, clarify, eliminate inconsistencies, and make the code more user-friendly. We also completed, which we talked about at the December meeting, we completed definitions. Those I believe are around on pages 1 through 5 of the draft. We deleted obsolete definitions, we clarified, we made consistent, we relocated to other sections, and we established new definitions. We made all the purposes of the 4 residential districts, no new districts, consistent with the plans. And these were pretty minor changes, but they were necessary for the furtherance of the master plan implementation. As with commercial and industrial, for the principal uses, we reformatted to a use table. We restricted the uses that were not consistent with the purposes of the zoning districts. And specifically, that was changes to the multifamily senior housing, funeral establishments, medical clinics, country inns, and certain community and recreational uses, which are not prohibited, but went from being permitted to conditional uses. We also completed and talked about in December the accessory uses. We have created no new accessory uses, but we have eliminated private kennels so that the keeping of pets will no longer be regulated by the zoning code. And then we clarified, expanded, and relocated the requirements that were in the old definitions to one single new section. For bulk requirements, again, we reformatted it to a single table with consistent descriptions for ease, for everybody's ease, I guess. And then we will be incorporating accompanying illustrations. Those were not sent to you yet. I'll send those before our next meeting. There's just several of them at this point, but we do expect to expand on it if we are able to incorporate them into the code. And then the cluster regulations, which are not a change to the zoning code, but rather chapter 155, and that is that very short text amendment that you received. We are not making any changes to the districts where they're allowed, which is currently for residential, the R40, the R20, and the R10, but we are eliminating a requirement for submittal of a conventional development plan. We also are stating that the yield of the zoning district may not be exceeded, and we established minimum lot sizes. So the new things that I'm going to talk very briefly about tonight, and Jay and Brenda can chime in if you have any questions, because they were the ones that really worked on these necessary changes, really accomplish 5 goals. They simplify and streamline the approval processes. They relax certain requirements. They provide consistency and clarity for enforcement. We removed, as I said earlier, non-zoning issues from chapter 158, and it's reformatted to make more user-friendly. So in the area of simplifying and streamlining the approval processes, and you'll see it, I believe it's on page 1 of the text amendment, we're differentiating between what we're now calling an administrative adjustment, which is something that's approved by the zoning administrator, and a variance, which will be approved by the BZA. And we'll get into a lot more detail on that at the next meeting. We replaced the requirement for a public hearing for a zoning administrator administrative adjustment with the option of a hearing if it's requested. So that will streamline the process. And we also removed the percentage limitations on administrative adjustments that are approved by the zoning administrator. In the area of relaxing certain requirements, bulk requirements for properties in the conservation district that were originally in the ag district have been relaxed. And this is basically a grandfathering of properties that were put in the conservation district from the ag district, where it used to not be as strict as the new conservation district. Again, that will make more sense when we go page by page. And we also replaced the requirement for a public hearing for certain accessory uses, specifically home occupations and family daycare, with a signed affidavit instead of the requirement for a public hearing. In the area of providing consistency and clarity for enforcement, we codified the animal-related requirements regarding private stable and the keeping of fowl as an accessory use. These are currently permitted as accessory uses, but this codifies specifically what the definitions of these are and how many of them can be kept. We clarified the process for approval of temporary and seasonal uses, and you'll see a lot of it is simply relocating it to more logical sections of the code. And again, we removed non-zoning issues from chapter 158, which is specifically private kennels. The keeping of personal pets will no longer be regulated by the zoning chapter. And finally, we reformatted the code, this part of the code, to make it more user-friendly. We consolidated certain definitions. Again, we relocated requirements for temporary and seasonal uses to a new section. And we included all requirements for accessory uses in a single subsection, where before they were pretty much all over the chapter and it was difficult to locate them. So hopefully we've made everything, again, more user-friendly. Our next steps, we are at step 1 right now, which is holding Planning and Zoning Commission work sessions on the proposed text. As I said, we would anticipate at least the next few work sessions to talk about this. Solicit additional input from citizens, property owners, the BZA. We have sent them a letter with the attached draft so that they can have some input, especially on the sections that specifically impact them and other interested parties. And we did send out a draft to the Realtors Association, the Bar Association, the Building Industry Association, the Freedom Citizens Group, Finksburg Group. I'm probably missing a few groups, but any of the groups that have over the past year or two shown interest in what we're doing, we made sure they knew there's a final proposed draft out there right now. And again, that's not really a next step. That's going to be going on simultaneously with our review. So you will be getting probably input from those parties as you are reviewing it in the next work sessions. And then, as with all zoning text amendments, you will forward your recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, who will schedule work sessions, a public hearing, and then adopt the residential code. Are there any questions of a general nature without getting too much into the text at this point?
Thanks for the introduction, Mary.
Okay, you're welcome.
So if we don't have any questions for Mary, I'm going to go ahead and move on to item number 11, public comment. Do we have any callers on the line?
It looks like we have one caller for public comments.
Yes, this is John McGuire. I'm actually speaking for as an attorney for Lennar Homes, and I understand from Mary's presentation that this may be a little premature, so I'll be very brief. But we did want to Lennar has a presence and an ongoing interest in the county, and they do retirement communities. And they wanted to express their support for the new retirement village concept that you'll see in the ordinance. As you know, the demographics are showing an aging population, and they're seeing demand for these types of communities. And this retirement village concept seems to promote the kind of creativity that we haven't always had in the past. I have submitted some comments through Mary, which I assume will get to you at the appropriate time. But one thing I'd like you to think about is the potential of increasing the density for these retirement villages from the master plan aspirational maximum of 3.5 units to something more, maybe along the lines of up to 5 units an acre, reserving the discretion with the Planning Commission that would be appropriate. And the rationale for that, the reason why we think that would be consistent with the comprehensive plan, is that the impacts of these projects there are no impacts on schools. The impacts on water and sewer demand is probably 50% of what would be in an unrestricted residential setting. Traffic, peak hour traffic is less, and just the overall impact on neighborhood is less. It's a quieter setting. I also point out that under state law, the aspirational density in priority funding areas, where many of these villages would take place, would be something greater than 3.5 units per acre. And of course, in the local master plan, that seems to have been cited as a maximum density. But nevertheless, I think that in the looking at the impacts that a retirement village would bring, a higher density would be justified. And what are the other benefits? A broader mix of units, which is available to our aging public, more affordable units, increase in the county tax base, increase in sales revenue, obviously, to the developer, but that then becomes available to apply to amenities. And also with a larger or higher density, the pool for association dues increases, which fortifies the community, their fiscal abilities after the developer exits, which does, in fact, happen over time. That's the main issue that I think we'd ask for some special consideration. the other issues that I've presented through Mary are relatively minor, but the overall concept of the retirement village is certainly a positive, and we wanted to make that point. Thank you for your time.
John. Are there any other callers, Linda?
Looks like we have another caller on the line. If you can please state your name and what you're
Hi, this
calling
is
in.
Joanne Grundy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So hopefully everyone on the commission received, I sent an email. My name is Joe Grundy, and I'm a resident of the Freedom Community. Hopefully you all received the fact sheet that was sent via email to the group regarding the decision to reallocate public sewer. Commissioner Rothstein suggested a fact sheet would be a good way to summarize the concerns. I was hoping to have a spot on the agenda, but Mrs. Eisenberg informed me that it wasn't going to happen and that the agenda was full. So it was suggested that I call during the public comment period. As you know from the fact sheet, I strongly believe that the reallocation of public sewer should be revisited. I don't think the commission and the planning department fully understood the impacts of the decision on the existing older properties with small lots and other constraints. Since experiencing such impacts personally in 2018, I have become more involved in community planning and septic issues and have spent countless hours advocating for septic owners in Maryland and for those in our community. Just to give you some more information that wasn't on the fact sheet, we were the second owners of our first home, which was built in 1950. We sold it in 2019 at a loss with its original septic system. When we purchased the home in 2002, a new development was being built immediately behind our home with public water and sewer. And this was the time to connect our property and the 5 other lots on our street, still using the original systems, some from the 1940s. It's the result of the wettest year on record in 2018. I talked with neighbors whose systems truly failed. One family had to temporarily relocate for over 9 months while they sorted out how to pay for a $50,000 system and couldn't use their plumbing. They had to take out a second mortgage with a toddler and a baby on the way to pay for it. Their neighbor's system also failed and they couldn't afford to fix it. Another neighbor in a different area across the street from 26 had a newer system and it failed due to groundwater infiltration into her leach field. She actually had a bat tank and everything. I really feel that this is very important to take care of your existing residents within the PFA before reallocating this limited infrastructure. And as correspondence with Linda will show and part of the fact sheet, it doesn't have to be all on the homeowners and the county. There is grant funding available through the Bay Restoration Program, $20,000 for sewer connection, and there's also low interest grant money for the county to tap into. And obviously I work in construction. I also have an environmental background. I used to do watershed planning. You could definitely reduce the cost per home, per unit, if you did, entire streets. I know Commissioner Rothstein's home was connected years ago before he purchased it. If any of you live in an older home and you're in the city, or your home was connected, it's probably not on its original system. It just makes good sense. It's better for the community. It's better for the reservoirs and the environment. And I know we talked a little bit about the budget earlier. You have that on your agenda. I understand the importance of ag preservation. I worked briefly in Frederick County in that program, and I understand the need for a sheriff's station due to rapid growth. But when you have raw sewage going into somebody's backyard, and these houses have been around for decades, they're in a priority funding area, they're surrounded by public sewer, it's the right decision. It's also in accordance with the water resource element, which is incorporated into the 2018 plan. I would really like to talk about this again when there's more time to have some open dialogue. And thank you very much for your time.
you know.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other callers for this evening.
Okay, with that, our next meeting is Tuesday, February 16th. That's our normal business meeting. And welcome to our 2 new members. Hit the ground running. Got a lot still going on and a lot to do. So with that, we're not over too bad. And I'm going to go ahead and make a motion for adjournment, and I will see you guys in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Have a nice evening, everybody.